I am Fred Blackwell. I'm the CEO of the San Francisco Foundation, and I just wanted to say welcome to everyone. It is actually great to see a packed house on a Saturday morning like this to talk about an issue as important as the one that we are going to discuss all morning. I'm just going to say a couple of opening remarks, and then I'm going to introduce Mayor Schaaf and some of the other elected officials and leaders of MTC and ABAG in order to frame the day for us and also make a couple of opening remarks. But when I thought about what to say this morning, I was going to start with talking about how important a discussion this is, how deep the crisis is, and why it is important for all of us to act. But then the more I thought about it, I thought that anybody who's showing up this early in the morning on a Saturday in these numbers knows the importance of this issue. So I'm going to spare everybody that stuff, and I'm sure that we'll have more opportunities to talk about it in the future. But what I did want to do is talk a little bit about kind of how we may want to talk about this discussion and these issues today. And the reason why I want to start with that is because I have actually been in the last couple of years in a lot of meetings talking about the housing crisis and issues around displacement and gentrification. And I've been struck by the conversation because of how polarizing and how polarized the discussion has become. And so I actually wanted to just start with three things that I think that we as a community need to stop doing if we think that we're going to have a real substantial impact on these issues. And the first is we have to stop oversimplifying the problem and the solutions. We clearly have to build more housing. That is not up for discussion, really. I mean, we have not built enough housing in this region, and that's a problem. But the production of market rate housing alone is not going to solve this problem. And so to think about it that way is really an oversimplification of just, but like I said, the problem and the solution. The other thing, though, is that preservation and renter protection are also very important strategies in this regard. But those two are not silver bullets. Those have to be combined with other strategies too. The other thing is that, yes, we need to produce more affordable housing, but we've got to think about it in terms of what levels of affordability, and we have to not be naive about the challenges around financing. And so all of those things I think are important. So the first is we got to stop oversimplifying. The second is we have to stop avoiding the conversation about race. This is an issue that is important from a housing production point of view. But when we start to look at the data, we can tell that from a displacement point of view, there are certain communities that are more vulnerable. And for the most part, those are going to be communities of color and folks who have other vulnerable populations in this region. And even within that, if you start to look at places like San Francisco and Oakland, there's a sense of urgency in the African American community around this that just can't be ignored. And so if we are not talking about race and disaggregating data by race and coming up with customized solutions, again, we're not going to be able to solve these issues in the way that we think we can. The third thing that we have to do as we approach this conversation is we have to stop thinking about this as just a housing issue. This is much more complicated than that. The real estate pressures, the housing pressures, the gentrification and displacement issues start to arise the moment that we start to target certain areas for development, the moment that we say that we're going to make these areas more dense, the moment that we start to invest in parks and infrastructure and bike lanes and sidewalk improvements, or when these pressures start to occur. And so I'm not arguing that we don't make those investments, but what I am arguing is that we have to get much farther ahead of the discussion when we talk about these things and come up with strategies to address them. So I just wanted to talk about that and lay that out as three things that I think are important and I hope lay the groundwork for the rest of the conversation. We got to stop oversimplifying the conversation. We've got to stop avoiding the conversation about race, and we have to stop thinking about this as just a housing issue. So with that, I want to introduce Mayor Schaaf to come up and walk us through the day and talk about some of the objectives for the meeting. But again, I am very excited to be a part of this today, and I hope that we are able to find a higher common denominator today around the issues that we're trying to address. So Mayor Schaaf.
Oh, it's always a pleasure and intimidating to follow Fred Blackwell. But I am the mayor of this fair city, so it is my duty and my pleasure to welcome you to the city of Oakland for this critical regional convening about a crisis that we feel like we are the epicenter of. And I don't like to call it the affordable housing crisis. I call it the affordability crisis. And I like what Fred said about not oversimplifying this. The reason I call it the affordability crisis is because it is not just the cost of housing in this region, the limited supply of housing in this region, the vulnerability of housing for vulnerable residents, but it's also income. It's also wealth. It's also how people are earning to afford the high cost of living. So I don't want to lose that piece of it. I know that's not what we're here to talk about today, but things like raising the minimum wage are also critical for the housing conversation. Between 2010 and 2014, the Bay Area added nearly 500,000 private sector jobs to its economy. But during that same period, we built only 54,000 units of housing. This imbalance of just explosive economic growth without providing for the workers who are the backbone of our economy, that has put unbelievable stresses on our infrastructure, on our transportation systems, and have caused the cost of housing to spiral out of control. Oakland is the city in the country with the fastest divergent gap of rising housing costs to rising income. We are the most unaffordable city in America, and our rental market, we are now the fourth most expensive city in America. Little Oakland, isn't that amazing?
Believe it.
Yeah, anybody who's looking for an apartment right now definitely believes it. But while we are seeing the cost of living rising for everyone in this region, we are not seeing the income rising for everyone in this region. And that's why today is so important. Nearly a quarter of my residents here in Oakland are housing insecure. And that means they're facing high housing costs relative to their income. They're living in poor or overcrowded conditions, unhealthy conditions. They're at risk of eviction, or they are in fact homeless. In addition, nearly half of my residents are what we call asset poor. That means they do not have enough savings to live above the poverty line for at least 3 months. That is the state of things in Oakland today, and it is completely unacceptable. And I appreciate how Fred emphasized we cannot just build our way out of this problem. Our first priority here in Oakland is to protect the people who are living here now. Next week, we're going to be releasing, and I hope Claudia Capio, who is the co-chair of our housing cabinet, might be giving a little bit of a sneak peek. Oh, there you are, Claudia. Hey. And Carol, how we are going to make good on our commitment to protect 17,000 affordable households in Oakland with better policies and administration, as well as over the same 8-year period, create 17,000 new units of housing in Oakland. So at the end of the day, we need to make sure that this economic growth lifts up rather than pushes out people in this city. All right, I'm quickly going to walk you through the day. That has been my task because Dave Cartesi is, in a little stroke of irony, stuck on BART. Oh, are you here? Oh, do you still want me to do your task of walking people through the day, or you just, okay, I'm just gonna keep going. All right, so Fred's gonna introduce, I don't know, this mic is a little funny. Fred is gonna introduce some of the other elected officials here. We are going to, at 9:20, set the stage. Bay Area residents, in their own voices, are gonna tell us their personal experiences struggling with high housing costs and pressures to move. At 9:30, we're going to have the opening panel to really hear some expertise on what is causing our crisis and what are some of the things we should be aware of with regard to solutions. We will have a brief break at 10:30. At 10:45, there are going to be group discussions by sub-region. So enjoy doing that, but let us not forget that this is a regional problem and we have got to work as an entire region on it. At 11:45, there's going to be lunch where we will enjoy perspectives from outside the region, including from Seattle, where I think we are inspired by some of the things they have done there. And then 12:45 to 1:15, reports back from the group discussions, and then bringing it back home, the man who started us, Fred Blackwell, will end the day with his brilliant epiphanies. So enjoy, let us get to work. We have no time to waste. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Schaaf. So what I wanted to do next was actually bring some of the ABAG and MTC leadership to the podium to welcome you and make some opening remarks as well. First, I'd like to invite Councilmember Julie Pierce up. She's the ABAG president as well as an MTC commissioner. Julie.
Good morning. Is everybody awake? Ready to get rolling today? That's awesome. Welcome. This is a long time in coming, but it's a necessary discussion, and I'm glad to see so many here this morning. ABAG and MTC jointly are hosting this event to provide a forum for dialogue among all of us. All of us are stakeholders to talk about what works and what doesn't in regional housing markets. We are a very diverse Bay Area. It's not one size fits all. We all do know there is a crisis, both for the new workers arriving in the Bay Area and for our existing low-income communities where the costs are rising beyond control. Wages, as Libby said, have long stagnated. Even middle-income families, and that group is shrinking dramatically, are being displaced daily by rising rents. So, we're here today to talk about solutions, including where and how the regional agencies can provide some direct support. Is that finding a new source of income, funding? You know, redevelopment is not coming back, we know that. So we need to replace that resource. Do we need other legislation to help us solve this problem? We need solutions that are not a one-size-fits-all, but tailored to each of our different communities. Local control is still really important in the Bay Area. That's what makes us so unique and so special. We also need to recognize that the regional agencies, the state and federal governments must provide support to our local jurisdictions. We need to give them the tools and the resources they need to do the right thing. So we are looking forward to hearing your comments and your thoughts today. I want to thank you again for coming, and I'm looking forward to reporting out later what the results are. It will be an exciting day. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councilmember Pierce. And next, MTC Commissioner and San Francisco Supervisor David Campos.
Good morning. How's everyone? Buenos dias. So you know that since our presentation today begins and ends with Fred Blackwell, if we don't make enough progress, it's because of Fred Blackwell. So I'm kidding. I'm really excited to be here. But let me just provide a little bit of context, because I think that it's important to note that as much as we're talking about an affordability crisis, a housing crisis, there is a larger crisis going on. We had a presentation at the MTC a couple of weeks back from the Bay Area Council talking about the unprecedented level of economic growth and development in the Bay Area, and that is true. It's truly unprecedented. But at the core of what we're dealing with when we talk about this affordability crisis is that we are seeing something that is not just here in the Bay Area, but throughout this country, which is that there is a growing inequality that is reality for most Americans. And in places like San Francisco, it is truly a tale of two cities. San Francisco, on one hand, is arguably the wealthiest city in the country, but at the same time, according to the Brookings Institute, it's the city with the fastest growing inequality of any major city, and the second most unequal city, right behind Atlanta. And the fact that we are, on the cusp of overtaking a southern city tells you a little bit about what's happening here. And what's happening here is that we have, as the Bay Area Council report noted, an unprecedented level of economic growth and prosperity, but what's also unprecedented is that that has not flowed down to most people in this Bay Area. And so what you find yourselves is, whether it's housing, whether it's transportation, you have regional agencies and local agencies not being able to know how to tackle the consequences of a larger and macroeconomic problem, which is this rising inequality. And we can come up with an answer for housing, as we should, for transportation, but unless we fundamentally address this issue of inequality, we're going to continue to have this problem. And that's why I think that this is an important discussion, but it's a discussion that has to be taken a step further, because I think that we have to fundamentally change the dynamics of our economy so that when we talk about economic growth, we're not just talking about that tech worker getting a job, and that's important, but also that resident, that long-term resident of the Tenderloin or the Mission, who hasn't really benefited from that economic prosperity that San Francisco is talking about, and who in fact came out before that economic prosperity from a great recession. And so you have working class and middle class people that went from having a tough economic time during the Great Recession to this prosperous economy that they're not really benefiting from, and in fact that they are suffering from, because housing is more expensive, transportation is more expensive. So I'm very hopeful. I say that because I am very hopeful. I believe that if any region in this country can get this right, it is the Bay Area. And I'm really proud to be a part of this discussion. I'm proud that we are here in Oakland. It's not just an Oakland or a San Francisco issue. The fact is that the entire region is suffering from it. And I think that it's going to take all of us working together to get to a solution. Thank you very much.
So what we wanted to do now, as Mayor Schaaf said a little bit earlier, is set the stage by bringing some residents to the stage to share some perspectives from a very personal point of view.